Ideas, inspiration, innovation. This is The Game Changer. And now here's your host, Chicky Fitzgerald.
Good morning. This is Chicky Fitzgerald, and we have an international guest this morning. Actually, we met in New York City almost 2 decades ago. So lots of water has been under both bridges since we met. Let me introduce to you Sam Jacobs.
Hi, Chicky, and hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. Yes, it has. It was 20 years ago, and you were the leading expert on the travel industry, and you became the consultant, the go-to person on all travel-related industry topics, which was amazing. You helped us out a lot.
Well, and it was a really, really interesting time for my industry because there was a push for everybody to go public, and then there was a push for everybody to go private. And they went back and forth so much that I said that they were going to have to change the name of IPO to SPO because nobody was doing an initial public offering. It was the second and the third and the fourth. So
Totally.
anyway, those really were very, very special days, and even the company that you were with at the time, Garrison Lehman Group, has changed so much since then. And we had something very special there, and I really am believing that it's because you were there. And after you left,
thank you.
Things did change dramatically. I mean, they had technology come in and change the way that they interacted with their experts. But Sam, I would like to do a couple of things today in our talk. I want to start out by talking about a book that you wrote. And Sam, when was the book published? Do you even remember? It's been a little bit.
Yeah, November 15th, 2022.
Okay, great. Well, again, lots of water under the bridge during the time that you were writing it. And I know how long it takes to go from the thought of what a book should be and then getting it to its final form. And of course, that was all during the pandemic for you. So,
Yeah.
Sam, why don't you start out? And again, the book is called Kind Folks Finish First: The Considerate Path to Success in Business and Life. And I was sharing with you before we started the interview, you are so active on social media. And for those people who don't follow Sam on LinkedIn, you absolutely must, because no matter what industry you're in, the kinds of insights that Sam shares are absolutely from his core. And this isn't just a book about what he thinks should happen. This is the picture of the Sam Jacobs that I know. And Sam, so walk us through, why did you decide to write a book? Or did somebody come to you and say, Sam, you got to put this on paper?
It was closer to the latter, to be honest with you. The context for it was and sometimes I joke, the caveat is kind folks finish first in a zero interest rate environment. But during COVID, a lot of people, their businesses, just speaking from a business perspective and putting the humanity aside, a lot of people's businesses thrived, but a lot of people's businesses did really poorly. And Pavilion, the business that I started and that I run, really came of age, like many digital first businesses during the pandemic. And I had a coach that I talked to every Saturday, this guy named John Mark Shaw. And we were sort of, and all of this culminated at the time, hindsight's always interesting, but it culminated at the time in an investment from this company, Elephant Ventures, in April of 2021 for $25 million into a business that I'd really started not out of a desire to be some brilliant entrepreneur, or not out of a desire to generate any kind of wealth, but really out of a desire to structure the way that I helped my friends who are all fellow executives in kind of the high growth industry. And so it was a story about building this company and the principles and values that the company was built on, and frankly, the principles and values that I try. It's not, I'm always the first to say I'm not perfect, so I'm not holding myself up as a saint. I'm really saying these are principles that I've used to achieve business success. And so one of the important points I would say is there is there's an I guess an economic or business construct and context to the book. It's not about being kindness for its own sake, even though that's a good idea. It's about how you can use a certain different set of values to propel your professional success. And there's this moment when the editors at Wiley said, should it really be kind folks finish first? Shouldn't it be like the kindness effect or being kind? And I said, no, it's a book about using values and ideas around kindness to accelerate your career. So it needs to be about finishing first, because the whole point is this is a different path to achieving the goals that, many of us, all of us want to achieve, whether it's generate wealth, have impact, build lasting relationships, and build something of meaning in the world. And so he said, you got to write this book. I spent really most of 2021 writing the book, and then sent it to a few publishers, and then published it in November of 2022.
Mhm. And when did you start Pavilion?
I started it. It's this sort of like snowball accumulative effect of, so the picking one starting point is a little hard, because it really just started as a quarterly dinner series that I was hosting in New York. It started as the Brooklyn sales meetup when I worked at a company called Livestream, after one company after I left GLG.
Got
But I would say 2016 is when I started it.
Got it. Well, I want to touch on something that you just glossed over a little bit in that introduction. And you talked about weekly meeting with a coach. And when I think about you being the person that people want to meet with, but you actually take your time, and obviously your coach invests time in you. Tell me how that came about, and why that is important also for success, because I see that in my own husband. He has been having breakfast with the same guy for 16 years now.
Oh,
and
that's so cool.
and I know so many women whose husbands really don't even have good friends, let alone someone that plays that pivotal role in helping them know what they really stand for, right? And what's important, and how to make decisions based on that.
It's a great question. And I guess for me, in hindsight, because, Pavilion has been through a lot of downs as well as ups after the tech recession of, 2022, 2023. So the story is slightly colored, but the one thing that persists and that remains is that the main focus of the kindness that I reference in the book is kindness towards yourself personally. And that's where the coach comes into play, because I started working with this coach really in 2019, when I had just started working on Pavilion full time. I started working on the business full time in December of 2018. And in 2019, my friend Scott referred me to this guy, John Mark Shaw, and we set up weekly calls every Saturday, actually. And so how does it different? What is the purpose? What is the function of the coach for me? Is he a strategy coach? Sure. He is somebody that I can walk through different business decisions, and he has the full context now. But that's not the primary use case. The primary use case is actually that for a lot of my professional life, a lot of my life, including when we worked together at GLG, my inner monologue was not optimized for happiness. And my inner monologue was very judgmental, was very dismissive of my accomplishments, and was not quite supportive. And that led to me creating a certain kind of energy in interactions with others that often didn't foster success or advancement. And so the first thing that the coach he does is really he helps. He says he holds his clients in unconditional positive regard, right? So he's your fan. Yes, he's critical. Yes, he can tell you don't do this instead. But he is somebody that is cheering you on unabashedly. And it is funny when you sort of say it like that, because you realize there's not that many people that are like that. Your parents are probably like that. Your husband or your wife, your partner, hopefully is like that. But sometimes there's even competitive dynamics in your friendships. And so the first thing he does is you're the hero in his world. And he teaches you that idea is not is not offensive. It's not, egotistical. It's not arrogant. It's not saying be a jerk. It's just saying you deserve to be recognized as a great person because we're all great people in the eyes of God, to be honest. And I don't mean that in a particularly, organized religion way. I'm just saying that
Right.
we're all beautiful, but that includes you and me. Like we're part of
Right.
all of us. And so that's the first thing that he does. And then the second thing that he does is he creates a framework so that you can figure out what you want to achieve in your life and then go out and get it. And again, he is the voice. And I compared it to, I used to have a therapist many years ago. And my therapist, I would say to him, like, I always felt like I was different. I felt like I was special. And he'd say, that might be a problem, an issue of trauma from your childhood. Like the fact that you think you can accomplish great things is a personality flaw, not, not, a virtue or something to cultivate and to foster. So my coach is somebody that says, okay, where do you, and we do all of these exercises. I'm sure you've done some of them, Chicky, but one of the things we do is, future casting and visioning. So instead of holding an idea at a distance and saying, I hope, and here's all the reasons why it won't have happened, you put yourself in the shoes of somebody that's already accomplished that vision and you reflect back on what are the mechanisms that you used and you put yourself in that place of saying, I am the person that did X, Y, or Z. I am the person that raised $25 million. I am the person that navigated my business through a difficult transition and made it profitable again. I am the business that rebuilt its value to $100 million. And those exercises are really based on, you can call it woo woo or spiritual, but it's
Right.
the stuff that Napoleon Hill wrote about. It's the stuff that a lot of motivational speakers talk about. It's the premise of The Secret. It's the idea that our minds can shape outcomes in the real world. And that if
Right.
we focus on what we want to achieve and we define it, that will lead us to create the plan that we need to accomplish it. And it moves us closer to our goal. And underpinning that is a sense of possibility and a sense of acceptance that you're a good person. You are somebody that can achieve those things. You deserve those things. You don't not deserve them. And all of that seems to activate some kind of transformation. Now, that doesn't mean that, my life has been always up and to the right since we started working together. But I certainly credit him with a lot of helping me feel really, really good about the challenges that I've navigated over the last 5 years.
Right. Well, you bring up a really important point here is that we are imbued with certain characteristics and whether or not the therapist, thought those were character flaws, I happen to believe that God packs our bag, right? The bag for life before the foundation of the earth, right? Because that's my perspective in my faith. But we each one of the jobs we have, each of the relationships we have causes us to have to go and open that bag, right? And to see what is there for us. And I feel like in my own life, all of the failure as teacher, which I've had a fair bit of that in my entrepreneurial journeys, that's what gives me the impetus every single day to still get out of bed, right?
Yeah,
Because I know that my bag was packed for this journey, right?
100%.
And yeah, and it's just been amazing. So I want to touch on one of the things that I know that you zero in on in the book, and that is the importance of aligning your personal life with your professional life, and to really, and a lot of people call that authenticity, right? Because you can't successfully be one person in professional life and then be a completely different person personally.
Well, you just said it, but what do I think of when I think of my quote unquote superpowers? Other people might have different perspectives, but I've always thought that authenticity is the essence, is the stuff that really Pavilion uh, embodies and is imbued with, and it's about recognizing to the point, right? I think people are attracted. to it's not that you're depressive or negative, but they're attracted to the real stories that make up life. And so I've found that and every time I've tried to do something in a different way, it's always backfired on me. So what do I mean? I came out of GLG, and we worked together, and Chicky, you consulted for them, and I served them, these big hedge fund people and these mutual fund people, and they're very wealthy, and GLG sort of corrupted my mind in a certain way and made me think, money's the only thing that's important. And so I decided to sort of try and set out just to make money. And really, every time I've inordinately focused on making money, I've pushed it further away and I haven't made it. And the one time, that I generated wealth and had a significant outcome, which was through Pavilion 3 years ago, and really has been since I started working on Pavilion, was when I put money to the side completely and I just tried to bring my full self to the business that I was working on. And again, there's the cynical person can find, and you can always tell, like there's some actor in my head that's somewhat cynical, poking holes in every
Right.
argument I make. But the cynical person might say, "Sure, Sam, you got lucky, and money was free, and there was this huge tech boom, and so you had an outcome, but that doesn't mean that." Anything that you did contributed to it. You were just in the right place at the right time. You can choose to believe that. I choose to believe that, the way that I conducted myself and the way that I tried to build this company had something to do with it. I don't know who's right. We'll find out, when all the cards are face up. But until that point, it's much more fun to live my way, which is to think that you have an impact on what happens and that you have some agency in the world. So all of that is to say, when I found success, it is about aligning authenticity. And to your point, there's a big part of the book is saying, okay, before you set out into the world to accomplish your next big goal, there has to be a question that you can answer, which is, what do you stand for? Like, who are you and why are you here? And that's a question that you can answer that nobody else can. And there's no wrong answer to it, because if my answer is I want to make money, I love money so much, that's a fine answer, provided I do it ethically. It just whatever the answer is has to be your answer. And that's, again, this is why, even on LinkedIn and in the world of celebrity and social media, there's certain people that everybody points to and says, well, if I just try to be like the junior varsity version of that person, maybe I can ride on their coattails. And the answer is, but that's not what created them in the first place. What created those
Right.
special people, in whatever way that you find them, Joe Rogan, Howard Stern, whoever these well-known people are, they got there by being if ineffably themselves, like they were just themselves. And again, this is not to say I'm a huge Joe Rogan fan, but it's pretty radical to do 3.5, 4 hour podcast interviews in a world of short attention spans and
No kidding.
promote some of these crazy ideas, and he's willing to do it. And so it's like, okay, I'll create a 4 hour interview. Well, sure, maybe if people want to listen to the things that you have to say for 4 hours. So anyway, long story long is I really do agree with you. Like, the more authentic you can be, which requires some work, because the work that's required is to figure out how can you be yourself if you don't know, right? So like, first thing you got to do is figure that out.
I just lost your audio there for just a
Oh,
second. So if you can just restate that, I'll edit that out.
yeah, sure. I said that the first thing you've got to figure out before you figure out what you stand for is who are you? Because you can't get what you want unless you've defined it, and you can't begin to live authentically out in the world if you've never figured out who you are in the first place.
Right. Well, you also described that as resetting your destination, because and you just gave us your own story of where at one time money was the destination. And
Yeah.
then you realize that that can be a part of the path, but it isn't the destination. And so how do you get to that place where you look at where you'll end up if you keep going the way you are, right? Which I really the issue is that you can choose your behavior, and I tell my children this all the time. You can choose your behavior, but you don't get to control the destination of where you're going to end up if you keep doing those things.
Well, I think there's no easy answer to that, in my opinion. I think the fundamental answer is there is a leap of faith that's required. You know, uh, that if you want guarantees, um, y- the world doesn't really work like that, and only the small things are guaranteed. The big things are not guaranteed, and the big things require risk and faith. And again, it doesn't have to be religious or spiritual faith, but it might require that, because it requires that you trust that whatever is going to happen next was intended. Just like you said, it's in the bag, or you got to check. Oh,
Thanks.
someone's listening. Doesn't agree with me.
Well, and I have to tell you that the picture that fell off the wall is of me jumping off of a
Oh
tower
my God.
at one of those events that you go to in corporate life, right? And
That's
I
great.
keep that up there to remind me that I can do anything. So
There you go.
wait,
Exactly to the point.
somebody wanted me to get that attention in too.
Yeah. I mean yeah. So I mean, I think like fundamentally to your point, like how do you do it? And how can you do it if you're in the muck? If you're Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're having trouble paying your rent, if you're worried about groceries, it's really hard to say money's not important. Let me fixate on, helping people or being supportive. And I completely understand that. But I do think, to accomplish truly great things, like the money has to be secondary to the impact and what you want to build. And you have to find the joy in doing that so much. Like the great paradox is that money comes from love. And you have to love, and if when you do something just because you love it, money tends to show up when you don't even care about the money in the first place. Whereas if all you do is obsess about money, it tends to repel it in some way. So
Right.
I don't have the answer for that, but that's been my experience.
Well, but I think you just led into it because the corollary to seeking after money is to be focused on generosity and giving,
Yeah,
which is core to both love and kindness,
yeah,
right? And the thing I have discovered, and my company's tagline is actually give more, make more, because we believe that it's as fundamental a principle as gravity, that you can't choose to jump off a two-story building and defy gravity. And I also believe you can't give without receiving. And you just look at the principles of, breathing. You breathe out and you breathe in, and the tide goes out and it comes in. And that's how giving is, even for people who are not doing it for the right reasons. And again, you talked about a lot of the greed that we saw in the GLG days. And that was because of the time of what was going on, but those people still exist, and many of them who do have a lot of money are givers, right? And
yeah.
even though there are bad things behind it, and goodness comes back. So let's talk about generosity for a minute.
Sure. What would you like to talk about?
Well, I would like to talk about the role that you believe that it plays in success, because you frame it as one of the components of
Yep.
kindness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that as you reset your generation, you then need to be powered by generosity in getting to that generation or
100%. Yeah. So just as you said, I have a very, again, I layer these metaphors in not because I'm so cynical, but because the book is called Kind Folks Finish First. So think of the mafia, which is, what does the mafia do? What did Don Corleone do? He did favors for people, and he didn't ask for anything in return. And he would say, I'm going to do this for you. And then there's going to be a day when I need something from you. But until that day, I'm just going to do it for you. Now, of course, there's, let's put aside the weekly payments and all that other stuff. But the point is that giving and being generous is a mechanism to accumulate power and influence, right? Because if you are somebody that, and it's also, I think perhaps the most important thing is, in a world like ours, it's a competitive differentiator. You look different. See, everybody wants to help you and then send you an invoice right away. Everybody wants to say, okay, well, I'm not going to do that until you send me my $1,000. And the person that says, you don't need to pay me for this, I'm happy to help. You don't need to pay me for this, I'm happy to help. That person, first of all, is viewed very differently. So even if you're just trying to stand out in a world of constant interventions and internet and communications and digital signals. Even just if that was the only motivation, that would be a good motivation. But the secondary point of it is that as you help other people, so what does help mean, and how did I employ it with Pavilion? A lot of it's helping people find jobs. A lot of it's being a sounding board. A lot of it's being a coach in a moment of sensitivity. A lot of it is reaching out and saying, "Hey, I was thinking about you, and this is my thought for you." Uh, a lot of it is giving resources away for free. Hey, here's a template that you can use. Hey, I don't know if you need this, but just so you know, this is a possibility that you could employ in your business. You do that, and especially as a connector. And this is one of the things that I really enjoyed with GLG, was like the puzzle piece of who's the right person to answer
I
this question. And that's part of why I love connecting people, and part of it is the act of doing good, sure, but also a big part of it is the puzzle piece of, oh, I know who you should talk to. You should talk to XYZ person. So anyway, when you do those things, right, and you regularly do them, and maybe you regularly do them because you got a day job, so you don't need the money, or maybe you regularly do it because whatever the reason, but you are somebody that just gives, 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 gives. What you're doing is you become known as a person that can help. And as a person known as somebody that can help, more people come to you, and more people come to you with ideas, and more people come to you for access, and more people come to you for connections. And all of a sudden, you've accumulated power. You are a powerful person, and you're using it for good. So I think some people view, and all it really requires, there's three big rules in Pavilion: give before you get, build relationships, not transactions, and play a big long game versus a short small game. And that's the point of all of that, is if you just believe a little bit in karma, you don't have to do everything based on karma, but if you just believe, I'm going to do these things, they're not going to, it's not a guarantee, right? It's a leap of faith. Nobody's going to send me saying good things will happen to you on December 14th at 3 p.m. If you just don't need that, you'll be amazed at how many good things happen quicker than you think, just not tomorrow, And it's
Oh,
not going to take
I
10 years.
so believe that, Sam. And I was just telling someone yesterday who was, of course, trying to sell me services and wanted to bring me leads. And I said, listen, I don't need leads. I need sales, right? You want to bring me a sale, and I will share with you much more generously than you could ever make the money of bringing me leads. I mean, you could bring me, tens of thousands of leads, and you wouldn't make what you make in bringing me one sale, right? So I was actually talking about that long game yesterday of, if you could just shift, you don't have to shift your entire business model to that, but if you could even take 10%, right? And that tends to be, certainly in the structured religion sense, that's the tithe. That's what you take off the top, right? And my company, because we are all about giving with our product Traveling to Give, we take 10% off of the top, not off of the bottom, and we donate to that to the charity of choice of our client, right? Because we believe in that principle of giving. And again, not to accumulate power, but you're absolutely right that is what happens. And
Right.
it's not a surprise, it's not an accident, it just is part of the principles of giving. So I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about listening. Again, one of the things that you talk about, and it really is kind to listen, and to really listen, and to take in what you're hearing, and perhaps turn it on its head and look at something in your own life, right? But talk about the role of listening in success.
Well, there's a value at Pavilion that we have, in terms of a guide stone for future strategy, and it says, listen closely, act quickly. So I think, again, the funny thing about capitalism is that, again, regulated capitalism, but in regulated capitalism, the way that you get rich is by listening to other people. And it's very interesting because it's not about you, because building a company is solving a problem for another person. And so for me, it's not even just the how did I create my business? The way I created my business was by trying to talk a little bit less and listen to my friends and listen to my customers and say, what do you need? And it's so that value, listen closely, means not just what they're saying, but what they're not saying. And how do you synthesize all of these different conversations? But ultimately, people will tell you what their problems are, and then it's up to you to build something, act quickly, that helps them solve their problems. So listening, I think, is and really listening is a euphemism for empathy. It's can you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and can you imagine what it's like to be them and how they feel when they wake up every day, and what can you do to make that a little bit easier and a little bit better? And so, that's the point. And again, I think like capital to build something super super successful almost requires this act of empathy, this act of figuring out, okay, what does that person need? How am I going to get there? Where will the world be and what will the world need in that moment? So I think listening is crucial.
So, Sam, when we first met, there were a number of crises going on in the early 2000 timeframe. Obviously, we had just a crisis of the whole .com business blowing up, and that was where my core business resided, with online travel being in its infancy. And then, of course, right behind that, we had September 11th. And, you were obviously geographically much closer to that, actually being in New York City, but we were all impacted by it. And, one of the things that I remember is that there was no sense of crisis in the business because crisis was an opportunity. Right. So let's talk about crisis as an opportunity. And if you are currently listening to this broadcast and you are facing either a failure or a crisis of confidence, or a real crisis, how can you turn that into an opportunity? And is that attitude or is it action, or both?
I think attitude precedes action. But I think that's exactly right. That, you know, as Henry Ford said, right? Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And that's really, really, really true. And not everybody believes it. Some people hear that and they just don't believe it. And that's fine. You're going to get the results that you think you should get. But most of the time, if you can so how does this relate to me? I've been fired a bunch of times from different jobs. And the most recent time, the book opens with me getting fired at a rest stop on the New Jersey Turnpike in 2017, Friday the 13th of October, 2017. And in that moment, again, you could say there's lots of different stories you could tell about my career. You could say fired 4 of his last 5 jobs. You could also say continue, multiple serial CRO who has built a successful global community. You can say anything you want. And what you say to yourself has a big determinant on what happens in your life. So my point is I got fired, and it was really I had just left another company. This woman that I worked for had spent more time recruiting me than letting me, try to do the job that she recruited me for. And that's okay, because I don't think I was a good fit. But the fundamental point is I said in that moment, I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this as a launch pad. I'm going to take this and I don't know how. I just decided. And instead of wallowing, and this is what I say in the book, instead of, I didn't need to go somewhere to lick my wounds, or, I sometimes think that stuff actually does more harm than good. What I did was just dove in. And so I said, you know what? I've been really reliant on other people to make money for the last 20 years. It's time for me to figure out how to make my own money. And that began my entrepreneurial journey the second time. And so I started calling everybody I knew. I started documenting my process. I started a revenue consulting firm that became very successful very quickly. And by the way, because I'd been helping people all along the way, it was very easy to make a few phone calls and get a few clients within a couple of conversations. And that was really that moment in 2017. I worked one more place in 2018, but that was a very special kind of circumstance. But that was really the moment that Pavilion was launched, was me deciding. And and that doesn't mean it's been all up and to the right ever since, but it does mean even, as we've navigated the challenges of 2023 and 2024, that there's a stoicism that's critical of saying every time you're calling it a failure, then it's a failure. But if you call it experience and wisdom, if every setback is an opportunity, just as you said, a crisis, it's an opportunity, and it can be an opportunity. You need to let your sympathetic nervous system settle down. You need to take some deep breaths and not panic. And then you need to say, how can I turn this into an opportunity? How is this an opportunity for me? And, even for me right now in this moment, that's a good lesson, because there's always circumstances where I'm saying, okay, but how is this an opportunity?
Right. Well, it's so interesting, Sam, because as I look at my own journey, I encountered a woman who was coaching me for a period, and she told me that I had to stop telling my story the way I was telling it. And it's exactly what you just said, because and I didn't get fired, but I had a number of intrapreneurial failures within the corporations that I worked for. I worked for Sabre, and I did two different startups within the company where the company was actually funding it. I mean, I didn't realize how lucky I was because I had a paycheck and a $5 million check from Bob Crandall to do what we had set out to do. But now that I tell that story of being nurtured by the industry leaders who launched Travelocity, and then I moved on to WorldSpan, which became a part of Travelport. And, just as I tell the story differently, that's what creates the opportunity. And that's really what you've just said. So I want to shift before we turn to talking a little bit about you as a person. I want to talk about the last piece of the puzzle in the book, which is so surprising when you think of again the capitalistic background that you've had, and being right at the center of things when you were living in New York, of the center of that financial epicenter. And it's leading with love, which is so surprising, right? Leading with love just sounds like it doesn't fit as a piece of the puzzle, but it is the puzzle, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I talk about this a lot in the book, but the first place it starts with is you, is loving yourself. And that's not an obvious thing. And a lot of times people are in, complicated relationships with others, and they say that. They say they can't love you until they love themselves. And it doesn't, the first 20 years I heard that, I didn't know what it meant. Sure, you can. You can definitely love me without loving yourself. But no, because if you're disappointed, you're going to see everything through that lens. And so the first part of, transformation, I think, has to start with being kinder to yourself and leading with that self-affirmation. And, you know, Al Franken had that Stuart Smalley bit on Saturday Night Live, many years ago. But I think that stuff is really true, that you have to be encouraging to yourself. If you're not going to be nice to yourself, who else will be? The world is already tough enough. So I think I just find, my perspective has shifted, and I do, I come from a pretty rigorous academic background, the New York City, heart of finance, heart of like bloodthirsty capitalism and cutthroat capitalism and cynicism. And here I am saying, I believe that love is probably like the central unifying element of the universe, and that, we have an opportunity to manifest it in all kinds of ways, and that us like using our bodies and our brains to build something that is incredible and connecting to all of us is not in opposition to the main idea here, but is a celebration of it. So, that's I came to that realization. It was painful and difficult, but in some ways, again, like the finished first part of the book is, it just works for me. It's a practical thing that works for me. If you don't want to believe what I believe, that's totally fine, but it works for me. It works for me to think that by trying to do good, by being a good partner, by being a good parent, that propels me in some way. And so yeah, that's how I feel about it. But again, the thing I would say to anybody listening is, like, the first place it starts is yourself. If you're not going to be kind to yourself, it's hard to expect other people to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that. And Sam, I want to go back and talk about Sam Jacobs. I want to talk about you and what made you into the person that someone in New York was even attracted to hire in the first place, right? And did you grow up with that kind of drive, or did it get instilled in you later in life? Let's talk about that.
I think it certainly wasn't instilled later. Maybe it's hard to say. I think the thing that was instilled as early, I've always been, I guess you could call it precocious. I was interested in the world and I had funny ideas about things. I think I've always had a resistance to authority. There's a famous story about my childhood when I started climbing out the window of my preschool or elementary school, and my parents said, "You can't do that." And I said, "Where is it written down that I can't do that?" Nobody said that I can't do that. So those are, that sort of iconoclast element, and the interest in the world, the curiosity about the world has always been there. And the thing that's sharpened over time, or ebbs and flows, it's a muscle, I suppose, is work ethic, is what are you willing to put in to accomplish it? And that's not something that's always been there. And that was honed in the years after I left GLG, actually. So it took me a while. I don't know who, I heard it somewhere, but I tend to believe that, men don't become men until their mid 30s, which is a very long time, unfortunately. But we're sort of underdeveloped species, as an underdeveloped gender. And so I think it just takes us a little while to grow up. And the thing that I've always been smart, but did I work hard? And did I work diligently? And did I have enough self-respect to, move around and be in good shape and treat myself the right way as a means to accomplishing whatever it was I was trying to accomplish? And that's really something I learned after I left GLG, to be honest with you. And
Well, that I mentioned at the beginning, you stood out from everyone else at GLG. I couldn't even name the people that you work with, to be honest with you, Sam, because you stood out so much. And in the way that you treated me, and just as background for people who are listening, I'm a college dropout. And in the world that Sam was playing in and in the world of GLG, a college dropout wasn't the norm for making $600 an hour to talk to somebody from private equity, right? That was not the norm. But you never ever made me feel like I wasn't enough, right? You saw where my expertise was, and you celebrated that, and to the point that every single time I was in New York, I came in to see you,
you
right?
did.
And it was to see you, right? and
Well,
and
that's nice.
so I don't know that I've ever shared that with you, but you had such an impact on me. And here we are 20 years later, right?
Isn't
And
that cool?
I consider you friend, right? And not that we talk all the time, but I mean, I definitely follow you, but it's not as celebrity. It's Sam, my friend, right? And you recently had an event where you were celebrating the best CROs in the world. And I will tell you, I reached out to every single one of them and connected to them and said, Sam is my friend. And he said, I should know you. And,
That's
and they're like,
amazing.
oh, cool. Right. And but I meant that from my heart. And I wasn't trying to leverage your relationship in any way that was bad. It was like, if Sam thinks that you're the best there is, then I have to know you. Right.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate it. Um, it never occurred to me to treat you anything. I mean, my lens, my filter is very straightforward. It's people with compassion that work hard. And if you've got those two things, we're probably going to get along. And, no BS people that aren't trying to spin me, and and are just willing to put the effort in to build something meaningful. And if anyway, so yeah, I mean, I love that story. Thanks for sharing it.
Well, and I'm way overdue in sharing it with you. But when I saw that you had written this book, and I'm actually reviving my podcast now to focus on people who are game changers, and you are a game changer. I mean, you do it every day, and I wish that you could actually see the impact that you're having on all the people that you touch. Because I know in social media, it's really easy to fall into that place of, oh, I need to post every day or whatever your schedule is. But again, when you're posting, and the contrast is so stark. I have been spending a lot of time on X lately, and everyone's posting about their posting statistics. And they're like, let's take this post viral. And it's like, why would I do that? There's nothing there other than you talking about your own numbers. Why, that means nothing to me. Yet, I will seek you out. And if I haven't been on LinkedIn lately, I will go and find it. And I think that is part of that kind folks thing that is coming across, because you are sharing of yourself every single day, and you are successful in business and in life. And I want to hear about like this next chapter of you. You've just moved outside the US and left this place that, you essentially grew up. And what's next for you?
Well, since you've known me, Chicky, there's one thing that I haven't had is a family. And I met somebody that lived in Barcelona, and she runs a software company, and she had just recruited a bunch of people to move to Barcelona. And she said, if you want to be with me, you have to move to Barcelona. So I said I should be, I should be able to run this business from anywhere. So next for me is in February, we're having a baby girl, and that's a big chapter for me because I don't have kids. So I've wanted a family my whole life. So the big next thing for me is everything that so many other people have had experiences with for many, many years, but I get it for the first time, which is a family with children, and that integration of professional and personal life. That's what I'm focused on.
Well, so let me tell you a little bit of my story that you may not know. So I didn't get married until I was 33. I was 40 before I had my daughter. And then we adopted my son from Russia when I was 45 and my husband was 53. So here we are now, 67 and 74. And I've got a 24-year-old son and I've got a 26-year-old daughter, both of whom live in Europe. And that's part of you and I were talking.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So you and I were talking before the show that my husband came home one day and announced that he wanted to retire in Spain. And, that actually will make sense because my daughter's getting married in November in the UK. My son lives in Poland. And it's like, okay, if they're going to live on that side of the pond and I'm going to have grandchildren on that side of the pond, I might want to live over there. So who knows what that next chapter
Come to Barcelona. We'd love to have you.
Oh, well, I told you we started out in
the south. Oh, right. You need the Florida climate.
Yeah, we wanted a little bit more of the Florida climate, but I'm from Wisconsin, so I know I have a little bit higher tolerance than my husband, who's from Southern California. But that is so wonderful. I am so excited for you, Sam, and starting with a girl is just amazing.
Oh, it's going to be the best. I can't wait.
Yeah. Well, Sam, this has just been amazing to reconnect, and I'm not going to let it be 20 years before we talk again. Well, we actually talked about 10 years ago, I think, but I'm definitely not going to let it be that long. I cherish your friendship.
Well, thank you so much, Chicky. It's great seeing you.
And again, we've been talking to Sam Jacobs, and amongst many, many other things, Sam wrote a book called Kind Folks Finish First, The Considerate Path to Success in Business and Life. And as I've mentioned multiple times throughout this interview, Sam lives this. And, it's so easy to take a look at, the printed word or at podcasts or even at daily posts on LinkedIn and think, oh, this is just a means to an end. And the one thing that you can take to the bank is this is Sam Jacobs. And Sam, thank you so much for your time, and enjoy your day and whatever the weather is in Barcelona today. It's actually absolutely glorious here in Florida. It's my favorite time of the year.
Oh, nice. Well, thank you, Chicky. It's been great being here. I can't wait to talk to you again soon. And if you're over here in Europe, let me know. We'll go out to dinner.
Count on it. Barcelona will definitely be on our list of things to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
You've been listening to The Game Changer. Ideas, inspiration, innovation with Chicky Fitzgerald.